Good morning. We are glad that you are here and logging in for another webinar resource hosted by Church and Casualty Insurance Agency. My name is Travis Chepkema. I'm president of Church and Casualty Insurance Agency. Have along Julie Ludwig, our director of marketing as well, and some great guests from KingdomOne. And we are excited to be talking about the employee retention credit this morning, and we're happy to partner with KingdomOne in that discussion. Just a little side note that the views and information expressed by KingdomOne are not necessarily the views of Church and Casualty, but we're excited to bring them to the table and talk about this needed topic and hopeful resource for you. So with that said, one other item, two quick items. One, this is being recorded. KingdomOne will talk to you a little bit more about where you can find it, and we will be following up with you that attended about where we'll place it as well. It'll be in a couple locations. So number one, that's the number one question we get asked is this being recorded? Speaking of questions, there's a little box right down there at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A. So we'll be taking questions throughout the presentation, and encourage you to ask questions and stick around for the entire webinar, because we'll do some Q&A at the end, and that's always a good and valuable time. So with that out of the way, I would like to introduce Nick Ovalle from KingdomOne, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Julie. At KingdomOne, we just aim for healthy, effective, and courageous churches by offering shared services like HR, finance, business administration, marketing, communications, IT, and production. The truth is we really do it all. And we're not just limited to churches. We serve nonprofits and Christian businesses. And I wanted to share a value that we have that I think is really important. We value relationship first. And the problem is that we have access to so much information. And that information, when it's unfiltered, can lead to overwhelm. At KingdomOne, we want you to have this information, but we want you to know that you can trust it because it's based upon relationship. We're putting our name behind what we're telling you today. And so we apply this within our organization by deploying trust. And we have a little quip we talk about becoming fast friends. And so know that we deploy that through our organization, and we want to share that with you. And the reason I tell you this is because CCIA and KingdomOne really want to look out for you, and we want to kind of show the roadmap that there might be risks and there might be opportunities that we can talk about and talk through. And so we partner today to help you understand ERC. But most importantly, we want you to know that you can ask any of us any question because we really are about relationship first. And so at the end of this presentation, there's going to be a URL where you can download the slides, so you don't have to take out your phone and take a picture of the screen, and then you have the flash on, and then you don't even have the picture. So we'll have a URL where you can download this. And I want to introduce to you Stephen Bush. He's our CEO at KingdomOne, and he spent time practicing HR in the marketplace for companies like Target, Activision Blizzard, and he served 6 years as a business administrator for a multi-site church in the high desert. I love how he's knowledgeable, but he's highly relational. And he will talk to you about a few opportunities at the end of this where your business can have some free resources from KingdomOne. And John Hughes is our CFO, and he's a main presenter today. John's a CPA, CFO, and he spent a majority of his career working in the not-profit space. And also, he's currently overseeing finances for a medical practice here in Southern California. So here's John to talk to you about ERC Made Easy.
Thanks, Nick. Let me just make sure I got my slides going here. Hopefully that starts popping up here in just a sec. So we are excited to be able to share this information with you today. Obviously, this has been a hot topic for a lot of organizations for the last well over 18 months now, especially in the last 10 with some changes to the legislation that came about. We'll talk about that in just a sec. And there is so much content available out there on the internet. If you are looking for information on ERC, kind of getting ready for this presentation, I did a quick Google search because that's what we should always do, and found that about 55 million hits pop up when you type in employee retention credit into the search bar. So there's a plethora of information, and our hope in this time is to distill that down into a little bit more manageable content to give you some insights or some things to think about that may be different than what you're reading out on the internet or what you can get from various sources, as well as how to think about approaching and potentially applying for these credits. As a little bit of a background, how we got here, it's always helpful to give ourselves some context as to why we're talking about this and what's been going on to get to this point. And obviously, we know we're still in what feels like the middle of the pandemic, depending on where you live. If you're in California, it probably still feels like it. If you're in other parts of the country, probably not. But going back to March 12th is really when this whole thing started, from a legislation standpoint and with programs starting to be released. And the CARES Act was really the first one that came out that impacted so many organizations. And so that spans across for-profit and not-for-profit. And there were about 3 or 4 major components of the CARES Act that were released. One of those that most of us are familiar with is the PPP loan, which was wildly successful, super helpful, and really saving a lot of businesses some headache and heartache as they progress through the short recession and even through the pandemic. But part of that legislation provided the process of being able to choose PPP or ERC. So you were precluded to only one or the other, and most organizations chose to go the PPP route because of its the financial availability was a lot better, and that was a wise decision at that time. When President Trump at the end of December brought about legislation under this Taxpayer Certainty and Disaster Relief Tax Act, a couple of things happened. Obviously, there was some treatment changes on PPP loans, especially in the for-profit world, that was very, very much anticipated. But kind of what slid under the radar at the beginning of the year was that the or of the PPP loan or ERC went away, and it became and we became eligible. Everybody that took PPP dollars was able to be eligible for the ERC, which was huge. And so we've seen this flurry of activity since the beginning of the calendar year because it since became available to all PPP borrowers. And we'll get into how to deal with both of those things simultaneously here in just a sec. So the general rules, and this is the stuff that's out there all over the internet, but this is a really helpful slide, I think, to if you're looking at applying, or if you have applying, we're kind of condensing it all down into one spot so you can look at the rules. So in 2020, we knew that we had to have 100 or fewer employees to be able to qualify. That is a general rule. There are some exceptions to that, where if you were over 100, you could still receive the dollars for employees that you had to retain on staff, maybe that weren't working, but those are some of the details. You had to encounter a 50% decrease of your income compared to prior years or prior quarters, depending on the nature of your organization. And the or to this was the huge one: fully or partially suspended operations due to governmental order. And again, depending on the state that you're in, that may not have been your organization, but it could have been in another state. I'm looking at you, California. And then the benefit of that program, of that 2020 rules, was that you would get 50% of the first $10,000 of qualified wages and benefits. So I didn't note that in there, but in a subpoint here, I got that. So it does help. It does take into consideration benefits that you might provide to your staff. And that's all employees. That's I'll clarify that in just a sec, but that's all employees, including part-time. So said simpler, it's really about $5,000 per employee. Like I said, includes benefit costs, and it really is for the full year. So you go all the way back to March 12th through the end of the calendar year, you can get up to $10,000. Now that's for wages that were paid after that point. It excludes wages paid for PPP borrowers. So if you took a loan, and let's just hypothetically say you were able to qualify for forgiveness under the 8-week covered period, that 8 weeks that you use to qualify your wages for loan forgiveness under PPP would be excluded from the ERC calculation. You can't double dip. Kind of makes sense, but you can't apply for both, apply those wages to both programs. You only get to use them one time. Now, a huge caveat to the who qualifies, and I want to make sure it's clear, is that ministers, if you have ministers, by the definition of the IRS, those are the individuals that would get housing allowances or be able to claim exemptions from Social Security, Medicare, or they might get a SECA reimbursement. They are excluded from these calculations. They're not included because they are exempted from the FICA laws, or really is the employer portion of Social Security and Medicare, because this is a credit against those specific taxes. And technically the ministers don't pay into the employer portion of it. They do that on their own through the SECA Act. So 2021 rules, what changed? At the beginning of the year, we went from 100 to 500 or fewer employees. So now the swath becomes a lot larger. We go from a 50% decrease to a 20% decrease of income. So if you are 80% of normal, you could qualify for ERC. And again, that's compared to prior years or prior quarters. Again, it depends on the situation and the type of organization you are. Again, fully or partially suspended operations. These 2 points, and I'll just take a quick sidebar. There is a lot of nuance around them. There's about 10 explicit points that the IRS makes on their website about what qualifies as a especially a partially suspended operation. We're not going to go into the details on that here because it's pretty technical, and it is dependent upon your organization. So the circumstances or geography you might be in are what could be wildly different, and apply that rule could apply that rule differently depending on the nature of your organization. So we'll talk about how you can get help and things like that in a bit, but I would work with a professional or somebody that you have engaged to help you think through these rules to make sure they're applied properly. Again, I'll use the California example because it's very easy. You know, most organizations were impacted, especially churches, not able to meet in person, or they had to have their congregations meet outdoors, and the modifications that were made to those services qualify for partially suspended operations because they were not able to conduct worship in the normal form that they were able to do that. Now, mask mandates and things like that does not qualify. There's some specific guidance related to that. So just an example, that's the kind of stuff we're describing. Now we move from 50% of the wages being qualified to 70% of the first $10,000 of wages being qualified. So now we're talking about not just $5,000 per employee, but $7,000 per employee. And the big difference here is that it still includes the benefit costs and all that, but it's per quarter. So Q1 2020, Q2 2021, all of each quarter that you qualify for, you would receive $7,000 per employee. So just in the last couple months, we saw the ERC get extended through Q3 and Q4 of 2021. So now we're talking about $28,000 potentially if you had met each of those requirements for all 4 quarters of the year. Each quarter is applied separately, but the maximum benefit has gone significantly higher under 2021. And again, PPP wages are excluded both round 1 and round 2. So we can't double dip in those. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit in just a sec about how the application works. We'll touch on that a little bit, but it's all done through the 941 process. If you're so we just closed Q3. If you qualify, you haven't filed your 941 for Q3, you could file, you could grab the credit and apply that immediately to your tax withholdings in Q3. You can also do the same thing in Q4. We'll come back to a little bit what to do with the other quarters in just a sec. So what to do next? And this is where we want to differentiate a little bit. And I think as Nick mentioned at the beginning, our goal is to really come alongside churches and ministries and help steward the resources that they're provided, both their staff, financial, facilities, et cetera, in a way that's wise and prudent. And so we want to kind of walk through some things to think about as the dollars are received. So when you've gone through the application process or the credit process, you've refiled or filed your 941s or 940Xs, and now you have some dollars on your lap. What do you do with them? And so we recognize that this is a windfall in a lot of ways, similar to PPP. And so a lot of the thought processes around PPP might be similar to the thought process here in ERC. The major caveat I want to make sure is clear here is if you're still struggling, especially if you're in that you've lost income or you're kind of trying to continue to survive, these are ideas to do with excess income. You may need these dollars to continue to work your way through the recession or the pandemic or not being able to hire enough staff, et cetera, et cetera. So please note that we caveat that all of these recommendations that if this is extra, and for a lot of organizations, this was extra income that they had not anticipated. So some of the good ideas that you can be thinking about are deferred maintenance. We would, as an accountant, we'd probably refer to this as our depreciation. Typically, we should invest a certain amount of dollars every year in the maintaining or saving for maintaining of our facilities equipment or other items around your organization. And if you've gotten behind, this is an awesome opportunity to look at catching up. If you're in the camping space, a lot of my background is in camping. There's a lot of deferred maintenance at camps. Great chance to invest some dollars to bring the facilities back up to speed, maybe new bunks for the next summer camp coming up, et cetera, et cetera. If you have equipment upgrades that maybe you've gotten a little bit behind on, or you need to make some improvements to equipments, this is a great chance to do that. This is, I'm thinking right now with winter coming on, a great time to look at your, especially like AC units. We don't necessarily need them unless you're again in Southern California, it's getting really hot, we're still really hot. You may not still need your AC, but if you're starting to see some equipment come offline for the winter, now might be a great chance to upgrade those, get the facility back and ready for the summer season, or roofs, et cetera, et cetera. And during the pandemic or in the periods of recession, oftentimes organizations suspend matching contributions to retirement, or there isn't one altogether. That could be a consideration as a way to bless your staff, to re-engage the matching contribution, or just to make a one-time addition to their retirement account as you see fit. Or missional support, depending on the partners that you work with through your ministry. You may have some that you have wanted to support or not able to do that. You could make a special contribution to those organizations on a one-time basis. As well as reserve funding is another key item to consider. Maybe those that reserves got depleted for any number of reasons. The last 18 months, maybe they got utilized. Setting the funds aside to help bolster up a 3 to 6 to 9 month operating reserve could be a really wise decision, so that if you need those funds for a rainy day, let's say another recession on the horizon comes about, you may have those. In my mind, I think of Joseph in the storehouses of Egypt in the Old Testament. This thinking ahead for the famine that was coming, planning ahead, and having the storehouses full allows for ministry to continue even when the economics aren't there on a day-to-day basis. And then startup funds. If you're looking at a strategic ministry that you're wanting to invest in that takes some capital or some dollars to get off the ground, this is the time to do that, or dollars that can help you do that. The real idea here is that if you need to inject funds that to create the revenue stream that will eventually be generated to offset the costs associated with it, that's how you would want to use these dollars. We want to kind of stay away from the theme here is one time. We don't want to really invest too heavily in reoccurring costs, because these dollars will not always be there. They're exceptional, they're windfalls. Now, if you're investing again strategically, that's going to help generate income further down the road. That's a whole different ballgame, because that's where you're looking at it as kind of like startup funds. You may have a capital campaign coming down the road, and these dollars can help as seed money for that. It's always helpful to start a program or start a fundraising program with money in the bank. It kind of helps the momentum get started a little bit quicker. And then if you're at all considering self-insurance of any type of program, property, or benefits, these dollars can help get claims reserves funded as you walk into those waters. Don't do that though without talking to an insurance agent. We've got some on the webinar, so I would suggest talking to them. They're not bad ideas, but we're going to call them our less good ideas. Be careful about hiring staff or offsetting benefit costs, because those are reoccurring expenses that will be around for a while. And if you don't have those dollars in the future years, then you're going to have to retract on those, which would be difficult and uncomfortable to do. Similarly, just other reoccurring financial commitments. So those are some key considerations to think about as you're using these dollars or as they potentially come in. So we're going to talk now, kind of transition a little bit about how to apply. I spoke a little bit about the 941s, that if you're not familiar with those, they're your payroll tax or your quarterly tax filings with the state and fed, depending on what state you're in. Those will need to be, they can be modified going forward. If you've already filed 2020, which you probably already have in Q1, Q2, you'll need to do a 941X. That's an amendment to that return. Not too complicated to do, but that is the filing that's completed. And if you file the X, then you're going to be requesting the dollars to be remitted to you through, I believe it's the form 7200, which will get the IRS to trigger the payment of the refund. We'll come to some specifics on that in a little bit. So how to apply? We talked about the technical side of that, but who can help you apply? A lot of organizations are needing that assistance because it can be a little bit technical, just knowing how to apply the rules or to be able to think about them with somebody who's done this a few times. So you are able to self-file. There's nothing that precludes you from doing that on your own. If you do your 941s yourself, you may be well equipped to self-file your amendments or to claim the credit on your own. If you outsource your payroll, think Paychex, Paylocity, ADP, Paycom, they may have the availability to do these amendments for you. A lot of their software packages have the calculation built in to their reports. And so check with your payroll service provider. They may do it at a fairly nominal fee because you're already engaged with them for other services. Depending on your organization, if you work with a CPA firm, if you're filing 990s, or you have a CPA on your board or staff that can help you with this, they might be a good resource for you. I do know of other CPAs that are engaged in this work, helping with PPP loan forgiveness and these types of claims credits to be able to claim. And then there's other companies, and obviously a little small plug for us at KingdomOne, but there are a lot of other companies out there that are coming alongside businesses and ministries to help file these returns and do some of this specific work. And if you're thinking about utilizing one of these services, there's some things to think about as you're walking into that, and make sure you're asking about, and that's their pricing structures. There's a cost always. There's no such thing as a free lunch, as we learned in our economic classes, but there's always a cost, whether you self-file it, that's your own internal staff and time, or you're going to outsource that. So be cognizant of what the cost is to do this work. Some organizations are going to charge a flat fee. That might be your service providers or your payroll service providers, where they're going to charge you $500, $1,000 to do an amendment on your 941, or your 941. Sorry, I was thinking 990. Your 941, and that may be a reasonable price to pay for that work to be done. Hourly services, which you're probably going to find amongst the CPAs, not an unreasonable price structure, but just be cognizant that the more work, the more effort they put in, the more costly it could be. And then there's another tier that we're seeing is the percentage of credits. Some organizations are charging, 5% of the credit that is awarded to the organization as their collection or their fee for service. Not my favorite model because I don't think the volume of work changes based on the quantity of dollars received. This is generally an Excel-based calculation that can be done once and then multiplied over your entire staff. There's some variabilities in that as well. So I would be cautious of those percentages of credits, but look for a cap on that. So that's where we see the mix of above, looking for some top end limit to, you're only going to pay X dollars amount. And that may be a better solution for you. There's one company that I know of that's charging, again, about 5% of collections up to, let's say $5,000 for all of the ERC modifications. Again, that could be a relatively inexpensive option for you, depending on how large your organization is, how large your credit is, et cetera, et cetera. So just be mindful of that, as well as some of the underlying services that are available along with the preparation. So with that, I'm going to take a breather. I've talked a lot. I'm going to kick it over to Stephen, and he's going to tell you just do a little bit of mini advertisement about Above Reproach for KingdomOne.
Real quickly too, John, if you don't mind, go back just one slide real fast. What I would tell you as well, if you are hearing all this and you are interested in receiving help and potentially completing your application for the ERC, KingdomOne is more than capable of helping you. We are helping multiple churches. If you'd like John and his team to roll up their sleeves and help you with that. I would also just point out, pricing structure wise, KingdomOne lands in the flat fee arena. As you heard John, our philosophy is that there's not an exponential growth in work commensurate with the amount of dollars received. I would caution you, there are what I would call maybe some predatory groups out there, and that might sound like too strong of a word, but some that are asking even for up to 15% of the credit. My highest recommendation to you is talk with a couple groups, get an idea of their process, get an idea of what they're committing to. If you land upon one, especially if they are a percentage based of the credit, I would highly recommend talk with at least one more, so you have a good idea of a contrast of what the level of service is commensurate with the cost. And again, if you would like potentially to receive some help from John and his team, we've got some information of how you can access that here just in a minute. Let's talk real quickly about Above Reproach. We're actually going to take just a maybe 30-second timeout from ERC if we can. So John, you can go to the next slide.
That's me.
You. At KingdomOne, as Nick mentioned, we are a faith-based parachurch ministry looking to help surround the church with as many resources, as many tools, and with people that can help in a variety of different disciplines. This one we might call a bit more HR. So if you're a finance person, you might be checking out already. But above reproach, what we have done is we have created a California compliant, but biblically based and steeped in scripture, sexual harassment prevention training course, and we called it Above Reproach. This course we're giving away to the Capital C Church absolutely free for a full year, and it is available. The employee version of it is available even today if you want to go to KingdomOne.academy. Here's my challenge to you, and then I'll turn it back over to John here so we can do some questions. And I know there's already some questions that have been placed here in the chat. But my challenge to you as a ministry leader, whether you're a pastor or you're overseeing a church camp or a Christian school or you're a faith-based nonprofit, here's the challenge. I think we're seeing so many instances occurring in ministry today related to sexual misconduct or to bullying or to harassment. And I think we would all agree that the bride of Christ should be a place where we would see the safest workplaces, the workplaces that the marketplace would aspire to be. And so our goal is that we would see at least 1,000 ministries complete this very important training. That way we can hopefully start combating sin and the strategy of the enemy as he would want to seek to destroy the work that the Lord is doing through each of you. And so if content in the past has been your barrier, you didn't like the trainings that existed, or you felt like it wasn't really made for the context of ministry, hopefully we have solved that problem. If cost has been the issue, that the trainings that you prefer have a cost associated with them that your ministry is not prepared to take on, hopefully we have solved that as well. And so what we are really trying to do is draw a line in the sand and say, let's all get better in this space together. Let's tackle this issue. And so we would challenge you even today, go check out Above Reproach. Again, it's 100% free in KingdomOne.academy. And we would love to see your ministry receive this free benefit from us. And so without further ado, what we want to do next is show you where you can find the slide deck, where you can find even a recording of this. And Travis will also mention where you can find this through Church and Casualty's website. So appreciate Travis, Julie, for having us. And I'm going to turn it over to Travis now to maybe guide us through some Q&A. That way we can interface a little bit with John and get some questions answered. So Travis, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. I think you can see me. Can you see me and hear me?
Yep.
I can't see myself. So, all right, we'll go from there. But I am going to turn it over to Julie to ask the questions of John. And John, maybe if you could, or maybe you're going to refer back to the slide deck. I'm not sure. You could remove the slide deck.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That might be helpful.
There you go.
There we go. All right, awesome. So Julie, we're going to take them in the order received, and then I will come back on. Go ahead, Julie.
All right. Thank you, Stephen and John, for your presentation. So let's get to the Q&A. Our first question comes from Terry. I'm going to combine these into one question. So Terry asks, how long do we have to wait for our refund if we filed on 5/21/21 on a 941X for Q1 2021? And is there a deadline to file for the fourth quarter of 2020 on the 941X?
Both are great questions. Obviously, the first is probably the more important and pertinent one. A little bit anecdotal. My email this morning, I get constant email updates from tax laws and all that stuff changing. And the headline was service levels delayed at IRS to 2014 levels. So the IRS is backed up big time. I think originally we were hearing is 3 to 6 months on the credit to be paid out. I've seen it in less than 3 months, but that was back in the summer. And I would venture to guess we're probably more into the 6 to 9 month category at this point of the year. I wish we could say it'd go faster. This is not in their typical exempt organization division. It's in a different division, I think. So it's probably a 6 month wait at the earliest. As far as the deadlines, there really isn't a deadline. Really what you're looking at is the statute of limitations for being able to go back and refile an amendment on your 941s, which is I think is a 3-year look back period. So we've got a little bit of time still to be able to get those in and done.
Great. Next question is from Mark, whose primary question is about qualification to the program. He asks, our synagogue was closed for a period of time due to COVID. We conducted services via Zoom. Our revenue drop was about 10% overall. The first year we had a PPP loan that was forgiven, and almost all of the forgiveness was based on payroll. I think we do not qualify for the ERP, but as a volunteer treasurer, I do not want to be wrong and cause our synagogue to miss out on, since our budget deficit is significant.
There's a few answers in there, a few questions I think that need to be considered. For one, there may be other factors at play. What geography, where are you located, depending on, were you closed voluntarily or because of a governmental order, and that governmental order, it can be either state, local, or obviously federal. And so it depends on the nature of that shutdown. Based on the 10% reduction of income or revenue, that would not be the qualifying factor. But if you were under a governmental order, having to meet digitally would potentially, I'm going to say potentially because we need to make sure the analysis is done well, that would potentially qualify as a significant change in operations, that partial suspension of operations. So you would be able to qualify under that factor, maybe definitely then not the reduction of income. The other side of it, again, some of it depends on the year, depends on the quarter or the year you're comparing your revenue to. But generally, if you were in a shutdown due to mandated order and you, let's say, again, conducted digitally, that's pretty significant and probably will qualify under the governmental order element.
Great. Next question comes from Dennis. It's a two-part question. If we do not file a 990, we are a religious 501c3 organization, can we qualify in 2021 for the 7K per employee?
Yes. Oh yeah, two parts. I see the other part, so I jumped ahead. Sorry. Do you want to finish it?
Yeah, sure. The second part, is this only a refund of payroll taxes paid, or is it a credit not connected to actual tax paid, rather per employee?
Yeah, those are good questions. So no, the 990 is not a factor in filing. If you're paying payroll taxes, you qualify for this. So whether you're a church who's exempted from that or a religious organization that maybe even has to file, you're fine either way. With regard to the credit, it is a full credit. It exceeds. So if you only contributed $500 based on that employee for their payroll taxes, you get up to $5,000. So it's not a refund of taxes paid. It is a credit up to that limit, to that full value. So you're not concerned about what you've already paid in, basically.
Great. Okay, so next question from Robin. We qualified for the ERC in 2021 because of a partial shutdown order, but that order was lifted in the middle of a quarter, August 1st, 2021, in July through September. Do we qualify for the portion of the quarter the shutdown order was in place, or for the entire quarter, or for none of the quarter?
That's a great question, and it's one that I had to wrestle with as well. And so if you incurred or encountered a shutdown at all in the quarter, you get the benefit of the full quarter. So even if it was just for a few weeks, you get all 12 weeks or almost 13 weeks of the quarter's value in it. So good question.
Great. And I think this next question might be related to above reproach, but it's an anonymous question that came in. Do we go online and create a profile?
Yes, if you could create a profile in KingdomOne.academy, what that's going to allow you to do is at the end actually receive a certificate, which is probably good to make sure that you have record that you've completed that particular training. And remember, there's laws in California specifically around the frequency of when you're supposed to have that completed. So if you do that, go log in, you'll be able to get a personal certificate upon the completion of the course.
Thanks, Stephen. Next question comes from Benjamin. We are a very small church with 3 part-time employees that received both rounds, 1 and 2, forgiven PPP loans. Is there any easy way to determine whether or not it is worth looking into applying for the ERC?
That's a relative. That's relative. For me, might be, maybe for someone else, maybe not. Yes. So I would first want to know if they're ministers or not. If they're ministers, then no, you wouldn't qualify. If they're regular employees, then that you pass test 1. I would be curious to know how much of those employees' wages were paid by the PPP loans. If they were fully covered for the majority of the year or all, let's say entirely for the year, then probably not worth looking into it because you used the PPP dollars. Those would be those first tests. Obviously, were you a part of were you subject to a governmental shutdown? Otherwise, it depends on the dollars available. If you're looking at part-time can be substantial still. You could still get 15, the $5,000 times 3 in 2020, you can get $7,000 per quarter per employee in 2021. Even if they're part-time, it just depends on how much wages they earn. So at that point, it could still be worth it. That's where some of those organizations that charge a percentage of the credit, your credit may be $2,000, but they're only going to charge you $50 for the work. That could be worth it. So it's a little bit relative to some of those facts. So I think it is worth looking into. Try and go back to those basic qualifiers and just run through those tests. You can just even do it on scratch paper and see if it pencils out for you.
All right. Next question from Cheryl. We are working with our CPA on these credits, and they have turned off our federal tax payments in our payroll system, which were automated. They said these will be offset by the credits. Is this a good practice?
Because it's a CPA doing it, it's possible. They're kind of on the hook for their work. I've seen that done. The payroll system, the organization I was working with, we were able to turn off our tax withholdings because we were instantly applying the credits against in the calculation in the system against the payroll tax liability. So it depends on how good they are. Again, there's some factors that play into it. It's not a bad thing to do. Is it a good practice? I would say it's not a bad practice. There is a little bit of risk, especially if they're incorrect in their calculations, but it might be fine.
All right. Next question is from John. If we had employees leave mid-2021 to retire or take another job, are we able to get credit for the time they did work for us?
Yes, it's the first $5,000 or $7,000 of it's the first 50% of the first $10,000 of wages, or 70% of the first $10,000 wages in 2021. So using 2021 as example, in those quarters, you would take the 70% of those dollars paid. So you should be able to get credit for them.
Awesome. Okay, next question from Deborah. What dates were churches mandated to shut down before the Supreme Court ruling? Does that affect us? We closed March 2020 to 2021 and went completely live stream. We meet the financial piece in 21, but not in 2020. Most of our employees are part-time.
I kind of want to be careful with this one just because of the legal component of that. And that's going to be where counsel is going to be helpful. And it depends on the state. It depends on the orders, because even though it depends. Even though the Supreme Court ruling said that you could continue, or that there's some unconstitutionalities there, some orders still stayed in place that required modifications of operations. So quantity of people that were able to participate, I think of youth ministry or children's ministries, could be wildly impacted, yet still comply or still be okay under the Supreme Court ruling, or the state would be, but you still had to do certain modifications that required operations to change significantly where you would still qualify. So, I mean, if you're live streaming, and again, you're in a state that has, or an area that had significant modifications, even though the Supreme Court ruling came out, you probably still should pursue this and take a look at it. I think that what I would caution, the one thing I would caution is if you're a church that said, we're not going to comply with the governmental orders and we're going to continue to meet, even though there was a governmental order in place, you didn't modify your operations. So it's if you complied with the requirements, or what came down from the state or local governments.
Great. Next question. We are a school and church that has payroll that files our 941 quarterly. Do I ask my payroll company if they filed for the ERC?
Yes, absolutely. I would start there because and ask if they have and they probably didn't unless you requested it. So it has to be initiated by the organization. And then if you didn't do that, they probably haven't. And so the next question would be to ask, are you able to do this for us? So I would ask them if they can do it, if they have done it or will do it, check what their fee structure is, but that's a great first place to start.
Great. And then our last question is from Dennis. Is the credit calculated on 50% of actual gross salary for the quarter, up to 5K in 2020 or 7K in 2021?
Yes, it's 50,000 or 50% of the first first 10,000 up to 5,000 in 2020. It's 70% in 2021, so a little bit different. But yeah, it's on gross and benefits as well.
Great. We just had another question come in from Deborah. Our payroll company is charging $2,500 first quarter of each year and $500 each additional quarter. Can you say if that seems fair?
I can no, because I don't know how many. I need to know more about what the potential earnings or potential credit would be with that to make sure that's fair. But I don't think that's it doesn't feel unfair. So I'm gonna, Stephen, if hopefully it's okay, I'm running this math through our model. That's about, so let's say you qualified for 2020 and the first 2 quarters, we would charge a similar amount, which is about around that $3,000 mark. So I would probably say that's about right. And I would be opposed to that. Again, if you're a small organization though, with only a couple staff, that's substantial. It's going to wipe away the credit. It could wipe away a significant amount of that credit. So that's just where you have to evaluate it based on your own organization's needs.
The other thing I'd chime in just real quickly is it sounds like it's a flat fee structure, which I think both John and I would agree is far more of a fair arrangement. What I can't tell is that if it is some kind of percentage base, but just based on what I see, it sounds like a flat fee, which I would say at least you understand, what that's looking like, and it's not going to scale based upon the output.
Thanks for that, because that gave me more time to think about a response too. A lot of that work is in that first quarter because it's determining eligibility, it's getting the files set up, it's getting everything structured. Each additional quarter really it's not that hard. It's almost like a copy and paste exercise. So a lot more investment goes into that first one. So if I'm thinking about it for what we do put a bunch more effort into the first quarter filing of really that 2021. We start to if you're thinking like a business person, the yields get a little bit better as you move multiple quarters out because it's a similar process. You have an understanding of the organization. So I would say that's pretty reasonable and would not be opposed to going after that, especially with your payroll company, because they're already ingrained. They have all your reports. They have all your information. Working with them, that's a good way to go. All
right. And then next question, is the ERC filed all the way back from March 2020 forward?
Yeah, so I didn't clarify it, and so there's an element of that. It's good for me to clarify this. It can go all the way back into the first quarter of 2020. You would have to amend Q1, 2, 3, 4, each quarter's amendment at 941s to be able to get the full $5,000 per employee for 2020. So yes, you can go that far back to do that amendment.
Great, and then I'm going to pass it over to Travis.
Well, the last question is a great segue. He said, I showed up late. How can I watch this again? So Stephen, John, you guys have a link, and Julie, you can talk about where we'll be placing it as well. So I'll let you guys go ahead and do that.
Absolutely. We have a link where we have the slide deck presently. And so you can go to kingdomone.co/ERC. Obviously, the deck is only so great, like the voiceover, John's information, the Q&A. That's probably where you're going to glean a lot more helpfulness. Church and Casualty, Julie can kind of speak to where that will live, and then we might just replicate that in that same landing page as well. So Julie, do you want to kind of speak to the recording timelines and delivery of that?
Yeah, so we will be sending out the recording to this webinar as well as the link to the KingdomOne page with the slides after this webinar. So you should receive it either by end of day today or tomorrow. So just look out for that email. We also upload it on our YouTube channel at Church and Casualty, and then it'll also be available on our website. So there's a couple different places that you can access it.
Can I just share one quick closing thought to Travis and Julie? I really hope that this information has been helpful. John is, in my opinion, just a really great communicator. But if you sit and you've heard this and you're thinking about, man, this is a lot of work, or how do I get my board to watch this and feel like this is something that's worthwhile looking into? I feel your pain and I feel where you're at. If you need help with this, again, hopefully the deck, the video recording will both be helpful to you. And again, if you would like to even interact with us a little bit to learn more, you can also find how to contact us through that link. The last thing I'll say is I think in a lot of ways, I marvel a little bit at perhaps how God might be even leveraging ERC just a little bit. Something that I think is uniquely different about maybe the ministry world and the marketplace is that ministries tended to hold on to their staff throughout the pandemic, whereas marketplace was a little quicker to maybe to let them go. And so what's interesting to me is, in a sense, ERC feels almost like a reward at the end without even necessarily knowing we were going to receive that. And so it's just cool to me to see how God might be provisioning his church who decided to be faithful during that time frame. And again, if you had to let staff go, I'm not trying to guilt trip you at all, but it is interesting just to think about how many churches are qualifying for this in unique ways where the marketplace might be struggling just a little bit more. And so with that, I hope that this has been encouraging to you. We so appreciate Travis and Julie just for allowing us just to collaborate with you on bringing this information to your clients and to the ministry world. And we are rooting for you here at KingdomOne. We love you guys. And I know there's a lot going on. And so hopefully this is just one more kind of little bit of relief of pressure and good, helpful information that you can turn into actionable next steps. So appreciate you guys.
John, Stephen, thank you for your time today. Thanks for the great information. And we're happy to give everyone attending 15 minutes of your day back. So we won't go the full hour, but thanks again for showing up, and we'll talk to you down the road. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.